welcome to our webinar series, and where we are going to talk about applications and experiences decoding global education. As we all know, like a lot of students, every year the numbers of applicants are increasing from our country, and they are mostly westbound, and most of them, many of them, I would say that they aim to go to Harvard, and that's why we thought that our opening webinar, you would be the perfect discussant, and so that's why we reached out to you. And thanks once again for joining us today.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Great. So, just to give everyone a little background about Akash. Uh, Akash currently works at Apollo Global Management as a private equity associate in the Financial Institutions Group (FIG). Prior to Apollo, Mr. Bagaria, Akash was an investment banking analyst at Goldman Sachs. Mr. Bagaria graduated magna cum laude from Harvard College with a BA in applied mathematics and economics and a citation in Chinese language. At Harvard, Akash earned high honors for his thesis titled Investing in India, Does Home Field Advantage Influence Success in Venture Capital? Akash was also president of the Harvard College US India Initiative, which is called Harvard US India Initiative. And that is when I got in touch with Akash. So he was president of that initiative. He organized conferences that drew 500 plus college students annually across India to engage in intellectual discourse and learn from renowned business leaders, government officials, artists and musicians, athletics, etc. So very brilliant career so far, and I'm sure he's going to go much farther. So it's a great privilege to having him today in our webinar. So we will start, Akash, with our questions. So we have prepared few questions, and if we will have time, then we will also ask audience to participants from today's webinar to ask you questions.
Of course.
So yeah. So first question to you, Akash. What do you believe made your application to Harvard stand out?
Yeah. So thank you again for all joining. I understand it's evening time for you all, and looking forward to the discussion. I think Dr. Kumar hit it right on the spot when he said that the number of applications keeps rising. And I think it's very important to focus on how you can differentiate your application. And so I think in large part, the best way to do that, however cliche it sounds, is to really focus on articulating what you're most passionate about and crafting a narrative to showcase that you've done one thing, you've done it exceptionally well, and you're very, very much invested in it. In all candor, I think a lot of us, obviously, Indian background, education is of utmost importance, but education is a common thread that ties a lot of us. To really differentiate yourself, I think thinking a bit more outside the box, even academically, if there's one part of the broader academia that you're focused on, that you think you care about most, where you can excel most, and you can really, have a compelling story. But even outside academics, look just holistically and try to find that one thing that you think can make yourself stand out in the application. So as an example for me, I had a major stutter growing up. And so throughout middle school, I actually could barely speak. And during middle school, I decided to pursue debate as a way of kind of forcing myself to go into public speaking. And so during high school, I ended up being very involved with Model UN, with debate. And then that was one extracurricular that I was very interested in. And the other was community service. In my high school, organized a lot of initiatives. I had started my own little organization. So I think having those two elements to really kind of be able to put, my stories into more vivid detail, and to really talk about, this is what I cared about a lot, and this is what I did, and this is how I interacted with others and engaged others to kind of make it something bigger than, just a hobby. I think that's the way that I made myself stand out. So of course, everyone, candidly checks the boxes on academics, and on just doing well in classes. And that is really important. You do have to meet that kind of hurdle of sorts. But thereafter, I think, especially as so many applications keep coming in, really trying to tell the admissions officer, okay, this is who I am, this is what I care about. And it can be anything. I mean, some of my friends, one did his on gaming, one did his on athletics, one did his on being a painter. So I think, you can really kind of, even if you're not amazing at it, so long as you put in the time and you can talk about it more articulately, I think that's the most important thing.
Excellent. So yeah, so that's very valuable, I think, insights. How did attending Harvard impact your career and personal development?
Yeah, I think tremendously. At the end of the day, you will get a very strong caliber education at a lot of institutions. So I don't think Harvard is differentiated far more than other colleges based on the sort of rigor of the curriculum and just the amount of, quote unquote, true educational learning that you
Mhm.
can absorb. But that said, I think really joining a campus where you're surrounded by people who are so driven, so passionate, so smart, people that you want to learn from. I think that was what really set Harvard sort of differentiated, in my view, was just seeing people from all walks of life, from all over the world, doing things completely different than myself. I mean, I studied math. One of my best friends studied humanities. The other one studied computer science. So, you can engage with people who think differently than you, who come from different backgrounds than you, and I think that's kind of the best way to go about things. And equally as important, I would say, just the level of access you get, with the Harvard ecosystem, with all the alumni that it's managed to produce, and with just the caliber of the infrastructure. So when I was part of the Harvard US India Initiative, I mean, that's how I met Dr. Kumar. And Dr. Kumar introduced me to some really, really cool people. And that was pivotal. That was instrumental to just my learning, just being able to learn outside the classroom, as we say.
Yeah.
So, having those kinds of clubs and having access to people who, know much more than you, who can introduce you to kind of ways of thinking. I think that's also how it really impacted my personal development. And then, the career as well, just being able to kind of ride the coattails of that, understand how different careers work and gain exposure to people in different careers. I mean, that's candidly how I managed to get to Goldman and then Apollo, was just meeting people from Harvard who, did those things, talking to them, thinking that that sounded like an interesting thing that I wanted to do, and then, having the luck to be able to do it.
Great. So yeah, I agree with all of these. I feel the same, and I think the level of professionalism also that you learn on the campus by uh, through faculties, through your colleagues, through your classmates. That's really sets you apart. So excellent. Yeah. So we will move on to next question. You studied economics at Harvard. How do you think Harvard's economics program differs from other Ivy League schools? Can you recommend other colleges with strong economics program?
Yeah, I mean, I think Harvard's economics program is incredibly good. I think lots of economics programs across the country are just as good as well. I think, within economics, you can think about, each institution has maybe a slightly differentiated approach to economics. So U Chicago is very famous in economics, but
Mhm.
its style of economics is maybe slightly different. That said, at an undergraduate level, I think you will get exposure to the whole realm of economics, and it doesn't really matter sort of which sort of like specialty you end up attending. But I would say U Chicago's high up there, Princeton's high up there. But if you look at any top 20, top 25 institution in the United States, you will
Mhm.
have incredibly good economics professors. Some of them
Mhm.
have even won Nobel Prizes.
Yeah.
And that will be there across the board. And obviously, I'm speaking from a U.S. Perspective because I was
Yeah.
born and raised here, and I know the landscape best. But I would imagine even in the UK, for example, there are really good economics programs too. So I would say at the end of the day, um, Harvard's is differentiated in some capacity in that I think you have some access to some very, very cool faculty. And that may be a tad unparalleled relative to other colleges. But that said, if you look at any strong institution and its economics program, the best way to go about it is just look up the professors. There are
Mhm.
some that are always going to be so impressive, and you may want to learn from them. And then that's the way I kind of did it was when I first set foot on campus, we have this thing called shopping period. So you can go and you can,
Yeah.
for the first week effectively, just try the different classes. Just sit in, take your notes. Classes proceed as per usual, but you still are allowed to kind of switch classes at the end of the week, for example, if you decided, okay, one doesn't suit you so well, or maybe you just happenstance went to one and then you decided it really piqued your interest, so you wanted to pursue that. So that's the best way to kind of determine which classes to slot into your calendar. And you know, I ended up looking at the economics list, seeing the list of professors, and saying, okay, I've heard of this professor. I've seen their work online. They've done, you know, stuff that I would love to get my hands dirty with. And so that's kind of how I chose my classes. And for example, there's one called Economics 1011B with a professor called Gabriel Chodoro Reach, who had a lot of government experience, who is just, you know, one of the smartest professors I've ever met. And, you know, just happening to go and shop his class and meeting him after class and going to his office hours and talking to him, that's the reason that I chose the class. And that was the best class I've taken at Harvard. So I would say that is something you can do at any
Yeah.
college,
Yeah.
not just Harvard, but that's how it, you know, that's how I decided to kind of
Yeah.
get into economics.
Yeah. So what I hear from you is that one should look at the profile of the faculties, and accordingly they can choose their colleges, when they are applying. So that is one strategy you are suggesting, if I am hearing it right, right?
Exactly, 100%.
Okay. 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 Let's move on to next question. What is the success ratio of applying of Harvard through restrictive early action, and how does it compare to the regular admission process in terms of applicant outcomes? So this is one question, that we have we have been asked. Like, this is a very normal question nowadays in India. So what is your take on this?
Of course. And it's a really good question. So, as you all are likely aware, there's restrictive early action and there's early decision. And so, some colleges offer early decision where you identify the college as saying, okay, this is a college where I'm absolutely certain that I would love to go. And if you get in ED, early decision, then you are committed to going to that college. So, you're no
Right.
longer in the process. You decided, okay, this is the college I want to go to. Early action enables you to have the opportunity to apply early. Once you get in, you can still look around for other colleges, but at least you have the comfort that, okay, I have a spot now at this college, and it might very well be the college you want to go to. So you
Mhm.
can decide to rest and quit the process because you know you've achieved your number one dream.
Mhm.
So Harvard is in the latter camp; it's an early action. But you know, lots of colleges, for example, UPenn is early decision. Early decision. If you think that you know a college that you would love to go to, that may be your number one choice, and it's early
Yeah.
decision, that objectively provides a sort of boost to your candidacy, because colleges know that, okay, if this person, you know, is admitted, obviously they'll come, and they also know that you are equally as interested in going because you decided to apply early decision. So applying early decision to UPenn or to Dartmouth or, you know, to a variety of other colleges, I think that helps quite a bit. Early action also helps on the margin, but I wouldn't say it helps as much. I think Harvard, the you know, admissions office actually says, and so I, you know, for context, I was the head tour guide at Harvard, so I
Mhm.
met admissions officers every week. Obviously, I'm not speaking in any capacity from the
Yeah.
admissions
Yeah.
office,
Yeah.
just
Sure.
from my experience there.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, applying early action. If you know, okay, this is a college where I want to apply early, it's my number one school, go ahead and do so. But it doesn't really provide you that substantial up a,
Evidence.
you know, boost to your candidacy. Early decision does though.
Okay. Okay. That's super clear. Okay, so let's move on to next one. What difficulties did you face while applying to Harvard, particularly when writing your essays, and how did you overcome them?
Yeah. So this was, I think, the toughest part was the essay writing process for me. just because you are asked these prompts, and then obviously so many things come to mind. You only
Right.
have 500 750 words, I think, something of that nature. So a relatively small number of words to be able to express your thoughts fully. So you have to do a lot of wordsmithing. You have to make sure you're kind of crisp and to the point, but you still have a hook so it's intriguing. But I think it kind of boils down to what I said at the start, which is if there are experiences that have been most formative to you, or there are hobbies or interests that you're most passionate about, those are natural points to start. And you can almost think about it from a back solving perspective. I think every prompt can be tied to something if you actually do the mental gymnastics to make that tie. So here's an example is I think I really wanted to touch on a few things like me overcoming my stutter through debate. I think that was something that meant a lot to me, that was very vivid in my mind because I had gone through it for years, and it's just something that I think I could paint sort of most vividly. So that was one experience. But equally, there was the community service initiatives, etc. But I knew, okay, here's a subset of 4 to 5 things that I'm most confident and most comfortable articulating, and I think best portray who I am and are most interesting from an admissions officer perspective. So those 4 to 5 things, I think that's when I decided, okay, every single prompt, let me think about which one of these 4 to 5 things can apply to this prompt. So it actually wasn't, and so this is a different way of approaching it, but this is the way that I approached it. So, some people may read the prompt and then start the brainstorming process. I did the reverse, where I brainstormed the 4 to 5 things that I had wanted to tell the admissions office, and then use those prompts as a way to articulate those. Because I think at the end of the day, you want to leverage the prompts as a way to differentiate yourself. When Dr. Kumar said there's so many applications, he's absolutely right. And the essay is truly the only part you get where you can, tell your story rather than them getting a bunch of numbers and a bunch of teacher recommendations. So, I think it's very important to use it deliberately.
Right. So, do you agree that in a way, essays are differentiator in your application? Like,
Yeah,
because there are a lot of people, there are a lot of candidates with similar set of SAT scores and then academic credentials. So, how do you get yourself differentiated? Do you think that
absolutely.
essays are the differentiators? Can be
Yeah,
differentiated?
100%. And the reason I also think this is because, you know, at at Harvard, for example, you have the opportunity to see your admissions file once you're a student. So you can apply to do it, and then they give you your admissions file, and they really give you the comments that admissions
Oh,
officers have.
wow.
Yeah,
Oh, I did not
so
know
that
that.
actually happens at Harvard, which
Okay.
I I don't think they broadcast it as publicly, but a bunch of my friends and I have done it. So you can see literally what they were writing about you and how they
Wow.
were reviewing you, which is interesting. But for all of us, one of the things they always touched on was the essay. Like, oh,
Mhm.
this is who Akash is. This is what he said in the essay.
Mhm.
Because, it sort of adds that human element. And so for admissions officers, they can start to really put a sort of face to the name, a story to the application. Like that's kind of the way that they can really make that tie. So it is, I think, a very strong differentiator.
Oh, great. Okay, could you share an example from your admission essay where you communicated why you choose Harvard and why you wanted to study economics? These two focuses.
Yeah. So I don't know if Harvard necessarily asked for why you want to do economics.
Hmm.
I think for the why Harvard's though, and lots of colleges ask relatively similar things,
Yeah.
that boiled down to, when I had visited and even what I've heard, and it's rather cliche, but it's all about the student body. And I think Harvard acknowledges that one of the biggest draws is just the campus and the community that it's cultivated.
Hmm.
So I had written an essay about a camping trip I had gone on and
Hmm.
sort of how we had all worked together. It was this overnight canoeing trip. I was a bit out of my comfort zone, but you end up working together with everyone. And through that sort of communal process, it ended up becoming a very memorable trip. I learned a lot. It was something along those lines, but it boiled down to this sort of very small, in the grander scheme of things, unimportant camping trip. But that was the way that I sort of articulated, here's why the people who I surround myself matter so much to me, and here's why I'm incredibly eager to join a community like Insert College here, where I can leverage my peers, I can learn from them, and I can just grow to become better and have that personal development that I want college to provide for me. So that's kind of a way I chosen an essay. I had thought about, okay, what matters to me most about said college? Oh, it's the student body, it's the community. How can I choose a story that sort of not maybe uniquely, but a bit specially illustrates that? And I chose this camping trip.
Oh, interesting. Very interesting. Okay. So the next one is, how did you build your profile during high school? Which areas did you focus on the most, and do you think Harvard places a particular emphasis on community service?
Yeah. So the way I built my profile in high school, I think obviously I was always interested in academics at large. I ended up studying math, but I was really passionate about history too. But in the classroom, I obviously had prioritized that. I mean, I think the majority of us on this call, education matters a lot, and that would be a common thread. But I think also when I had attended high school, I sort of started to reflect a bit more on, okay, what are things outside of the classroom that I would genuinely feel good pursuing, that I can see myself pursuing as more of a passion, and where I can excel. And so one of those, as I mentioned, was debate.
Yeah.
I ended up getting involved in my school newspaper. So I was managing editor of the school newspaper. I liked journalism. I liked writing. I liked hearing from others. So that was sort of the natural go-to there. And then community service. I think I've always really appreciated the sort of power of helping others, and just acknowledging how privileged we all are relative to other people, and just being able to kind of make an impact and do as best as we can. That was one thing that always spoke to me, and so I ended up pursuing that in high school too, and meeting friends in high school who also shared an interest in wanting to do community service and teaming up with them. So apart from debate, apart from the school newspaper, I had also started a club in school where we just raised money to buy bicycles for kids who needed to walk to school. And it was just something that I had come across back when I was in middle school. I had seen a bunch of kids once walk to school, and it really kind of had set a deep impression on me that I'm always whining about taking the school bus, but some people literally have to walk miles to even get to class, and they still do. So how can we make that an easier journey for them to promote their educations? Let's provide bicycles. They're relatively cheap, and it can quite literally be the make or break for an educational experience. So that was kind of my sort of interest there as well, that I had sharpened. And the way I'd done that too was I had a few other friends who also wanted to do that. So together we raised money. We had done these little bake sales and fundraisers, but that's sort of the way that we went about doing it. And those are the areas that I focus on the most. But everyone has their own interests. I mean, I'm
Of
one of
course.
the least athletic people I know, so I couldn't do sports that much, and I'm not very artistic, so I couldn't ever do music or painting or whatever.
Mhm.
But so I decided to do these three hobbies. People can do different hobbies, obviously. And do I think Harvard places this particular emphasis on community service? I would say yes, for sure. Community service matters a lot to Harvard. Now, I have some friends who were at Harvard who never really did much community service because they spent all their time, studying and doing sports, for example. So it's not like you need to 100% do community service. But I think, at least from my perspective, it's an avenue where everyone can do it. Everyone feels good doing it. It always is nice to kind of do it. And from Harvard's perspective, it is a bit of a differentiator in that it adds another element to who you are. It adds another dimension that you can speak to. So I would say it's not a particular make or break emphasis, but it is a really good to have.
Yeah.
And especially if you feel, passionate about it, which I think a
Yeah.
lot of us do. And, even just Indian culture at large, I think it's so community service oriented.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like that is something you should absolutely speak to.
Great. Yeah. Next is like, in the college application process, it is crucial to create a balanced list of schools that aligns with a student's academic, personal, and professional goals. Considering this, what key attributes should students prioritize when selecting colleges to apply to?
Yeah, absolutely. Um, Look, I might have a different take here. I think applying to colleges, I had always erred on the side of caution, so I applied to like 20. Just being like, okay, like let me see how this goes. Um, and a lot of times it was just through, maybe having a friend that went there who seemed to have a really good experience. Obviously, just word of mouth, hearing the name, oh, this is a good college, and it'll provide you a very rigorous and like, dynamic learning experience. Grow a lot at this college. So you can also just think about it from that perspective. But I had ended up applying to a pretty wide net of them. And then, if I was fortunate enough to be admitted, then you can do a bit more diligence. And I think there you can start talking to students that are there. How do you enjoy it? Maybe if you do have the opportunity, you can go and visit the college, but that's not necessary. But that's another way of understanding, is this the college for me? I think every college, or like a lot of them at least, will brand themselves, and probably truly, as very good academic experiences. You'll have lots of career opportunities. You'll have a lot of personal growth. I think so many colleges can offer that.
Yeah,
So I think it's tough to really be sort of nitpicky and say, okay, this is one college that does it better than others, because there's no true way of knowing that.
yeah,
So I think, feel free to, maybe you have people there and you can leverage it to have a bit deeper of an understanding of how this college really is. But if you don't, like I didn't know a lot of people at a lot of the colleges that I applied to, just apply if you've heard good things about them and you can see yourself maybe, it's in like, okay, so there are other factors you can consider. Like I never wanted to go super rural. I wanted somewhere with the city in my backyard where I can at least go to restaurants and I, had things to do. And maybe from a career perspective, it's, close by to other areas where I can see myself work. There are some colleges that are in the middle of nowhere where it's freezing cold all the time. I didn't want that. So I think there are ways you can sort of cross off certain colleges,
yeah,
but you'll
yeah.
still be left with the big list of them. And I think just apply to them. And then, you can always thereafter start to think about, okay, is this the college for me or not?
How many colleges did you apply to, if I may ask?
I think I ended up applying to some 18 or 19. I think it was something like that. So quite a few. And obviously I think there were some, the way that I had thought about it, were okay. There were some that you can never predict. Like Harvard, I mean, I was blessed to get in, but you never really can predict, can you get into Harvard or not, just because so many applicants, it is a lot of luck. But I think like there were 5 or 6 schools that I thought, okay, these are like very, very good schools. These would be really, like these would be the schools that I want to go to. Harvard was kind of the number one in my mind as, okay, this is my dream school. And then I ended up applying to some where I thought, okay, these are good schools. I'd be happy to go. Maybe not my number one choice, but, and then I had applied to 3 or 4 schools as like safety schools is what we call it. I.e., like, okay, I know hopefully I can get into college if I can apply to these 3 to 4. I think I have a very strong shot at them. So those are like safety schools. That's at least how my high school had sort of had to structure the process, was you have your dream schools, you have
Yeah.
your like good schools, and you have your safety schools. But I ended up applying to, I think, 18 or so.
Okay, that's helpful. Yeah, that is a standard practice, I believe.
Yeah.
So next question is, how can students decide the optimal number of college? Oh, so we just spoke
Yeah.
about this. So yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So could you suggest a strategy for students applying to undergraduate programs while choosing their common app essay topics?
Yeah. So the Common App is good because as as the name goes, it quite literally is the common app that every college ends up getting.
Yeah,
So you, I think, should really focus on having a strong Common App essay, because that's one essay that every single school will read. So obviously each college has their own sort of individual essay prompts, but I would say if you, I mean, everyone kind of has limited time because there's a deadline at some point. Prioritize the Common App essay because that's one that goes everywhere. And then I think at the same time, while you write your essay topic, like thinking about the undergraduate programs where you want to apply, in some way, I think they are inextricably linked. Where I think when you think about your Common App essay topic and you're writing it, you do start to reflect on what matters most to you. And look, candidly, like at least my experience, you sort of run through high school, you kind of join the rat race, you're busy with classes, you're busy with extracurriculars, and so you never get the time to really reflect. So the Common App essay is a good opportunity to start reflecting and thinking about, okay, what's the next step you want, what matters most to you, and that will inform your undergraduate program selection organically. So I think they are linked in some point. I also do think, though, that as you write your essay topic, like for me, I would, write for a couple of hours. I'd be incredibly tired. I would feel brain fried. And then I would think about, okay, like, let me now divert my attention to thinking about other colleges and maybe writing their essays, or maybe just kind of even doing the research on which colleges to apply to, as just a kind of other way of using my brain where I can, start to, like, I'm not just kind of burnt out from just essay writing on that one Common App essay topic. So it's just another way too of the, I think you can strategize it where you can focus on essay writing and then you can divert your mind a little bit to thinking about the selection process for your undergrad program. So I would say that's kind of another strategy you can employ.
Okay, great. So the next one is many students struggle with brainstorming and organizing their thoughts for essay writing. What do you think this is a uh, why do you think this is a common issue, and what can students do to overcome it? You spoke about essay writing, and so this is a common problem that we see in students, that at age when they are trying to uh, write high stake essays for their admissions. So what they should be doing? You spoke about it, but do you have additional suggestions, any other suggestions?
For sure. I mean, this was something I struggled with most, as I said. I think every applicant does. So don't feel like it's just you if you are struggling with it, just because there's so many topics that come to mind. I would say the best way to do it is, I'm highly against just writing one topic straight from the get-go, like something that comes to mind. Just spend all your time writing the 750 word essay or 500 or whatever it is. I think as topics come at the start, just kind of write down, okay, this is what comes to mind. This is what I'm passionate about. So for me, it was, okay, overcoming my stutter could be an interesting story. Community service could be an interesting story. So you can think about, okay, what are topics that you can see yourself writing an essay on? Then just start thinking about, okay, what are stories you can say on those topics? And so at least then you have a list. And then I would say read that list, maybe even run it by a friend or two, or like your parents. Like I had done that, saying, okay, what would you think is an interesting prompt to read? And even think about, in some capacity, is this a prompt that everybody would write? Like one of my topics was, oh, here's why I like math. Like so many people like math, right? So maybe that's not really a differentiator. So you can also like, but once you have the list of topics, then you can really go one by one and start to think about, okay, here's the pro of it, here's the con of it. I can write a good story here. I might be non-differentiated here. So then you can start to think and dissect and kind of, rank the topics. And at the end of the day, I think that's the best way to get to the topic that you should flesh out, and then you can spend your time actually writing a proper essay and fleshing it out. But I've seen some friends do this, and even I at the start had kind of done it, where I started writing a topic immediately, and then halfway during writing I realized, okay, this isn't actually that good of a topic. So instead of wasting your time doing that, maybe just start higher level, thinking about what are the possibilities, and then start writing.
Great, it makes sense. Yeah. Okay. The next one is, given the increasingly hectic nature of school curricula, how can students effectively balance academics, extracurricular activities, AP classes, SATs, and essay writing during the application process? So this is a very common struggle that the students go through. Do you have any advice on it?
Yeah. What I would say is, like, you do need to focus obviously on school still. I think the application process is very rigorous and very time consuming. But you also do have your sort of job as a student, and there's so many, extracurriculars, academics, SATs, etc. And you still need to be excelling at them. So for me, at least, my advice would be, look, at the end of the day, like, you still need to do well in classes. Like colleges get your teacher recommendations; those matter. Like you can't slack off from class completely. But that said, understand that you won't be perfect in every single thing that you do during that, call it few months, because there's so much going on. So just try to, dedicate your focus and prioritize as best you can. The way I did that also was, just to be able to divert my mind, like rather than doing one thing several hours at once and burning out, maybe do an hour of essay writing, then maybe focus on homework, then maybe come back to essay writing, then maybe do an extracurricular. So kind of just craft your schedule. Like I know that may not be helpful advice, but that sort of is what best did it for me.
Okay, that's helpful. How important are extracurricular activities in the admission process compared to academics and essay writing? What advice do you have for students in terms of prioritizing these components? I think you
Yeah.
spoke about this, but if you have additional suggestion about
Yeah, no, I
prioritizing.
mean, I think we hit on it. Just to be, like, just to say it shortly and sweetly again, is I think extracurriculars matter a lot because they were a very strong differentiator. So I think even as you write your essays and you do your academics, like especially the essay writing, might be even tied to your extracurriculars. I think in large part, a lot of people write their essays about their extracurriculars.
Yeah,
So I think definitely still prioritize those and pursue those. And look, hopefully you're doing extracurriculars that you enjoy doing. So in some way, it's even a nice breather from academics and essay writing. But I would say, yeah, definitely keep doing those.
very good. What is your opinion on research projects, passion projects, or capstone projects as part of profile building? How important is it for students to start these projects early?
Yeah, I would say it's not a necessity to do these, but it's definitely a good to have. It's a, extracurricular at the end of the day, or at least it can be, crafted as such. So for me, like I had done a research project in history. I was interested in history and I decided to do one. But I have some friends that did much, much more comprehensive research projects than I've done. Um, you can start early if you'd like. I think that's a good way of understanding what is a academic area that interests you most, and it might even help you in the classroom, and maybe even through classes you are encouraged to do them. So you can start early as you'd like, but um, I do think they are helpful. I think if there is something that you are interested in researching, absolutely by all means you should go ahead and you should pursue it with all your might. But I I wouldn't say at the same time that you should feel compelled to have one.
Okay, got it. What are your thoughts on using AI tools like ChatGPT for essay writing in the college application process, or getting some, you know, inspiration thoughts? Which features do you think students should take advantage of, and are there any that should be avoided to ensure originality and authenticity in their work? Whether they should be using this or not, because a lot of students are now familiar, they are so much into ChatGPT and other AI tools.
Yeah, no, this is where I don't often feel old, and then this question makes me feel old because I never had Chat GPT, in the college admissions process. So this is completely new.
Yeah,
But I think it's a very good question. What I would say, and obviously I didn't have any experience with it, but Chat GPT can be helpful on the margin, but I still wouldn't like I would still first refrain altogether from using it exactly to the point in the question about originality and authenticity. I
correct.
think that can be compromised incredibly easily if you leverage a tool like that. Um, you really should use the essay as a way of narrating your own story. It
Mm.
is your way of effectively making your argument to the admissions officer. Here's who I am, and here's why I'm interesting, and here's why I'd be a good fit for the college community. I think using an AI bot to effectively say that story on your behalf doesn't do you justice and can undermine the magnitude and the power of the story that you can say. So I would say first start brainstorming on your own. You know yourself best. Obviously, no AI tool does. Maybe during the application, maybe during the writing process, as you want to wordsmith, as you want to refine the way you're saying things, feel free to leverage a tool like that. But I would say the idea should truly emanate from you yourself,
Yeah.
and maybe you can end up using it as a like supporting actor. But don't by all means have that be kind of the central originator of your essay topic.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, and that's the authenticity and originality is very, very important, and that only comes from you yourself, and the word you use that can be compromised, that may be compromised, your authenticity and originality, I don't think chat gpt can provide you with. So that's a very excellent suggestion.
Thank you.
Okay, so it's a question and answer time. We will take probably two to three questions. If anyone wants to ask any question, you know, you can unmute yourself because I have not seen any questions in the chat box. So please feel free to unmute yourself, but be very specific so that in limited time we can take two three questions. You can raise your hand and I can name you. Anyone? Ananya Vasist. Yeah, Ananya, please go ahead and ask your question.
Hello, good evening. I just wanted to ask, like, I wanted to study economics in like at university. So I wanted to ask if there are any extracurriculars you did which were related to economics that like helped your application, something like that.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't think I did any extracurriculars that directly impacted and helped my interest in economics, but I think there were certain that touched on it. So, for example, when I was in the school newspaper, I wrote a few articles that pertained to, broader like geopolitical events that were big in the economic sphere. So I think that was a way of me understanding what's going on in the markets and talking about it in some capacity. I would say the vast majority of the articles that I wrote had nothing to do with economics, but some did, and those piqued my interest. Even similarly, Model UN, when you're creating any argument and you're researching any topic, economics organically comes up. So what I would say is, long-winded way of saying I didn't do any extracurriculars that directly had piqued my interest, but I think certain ones touched on them and then sort of subliminally did. I have some friends though that did research projects in economics and directly fleshed that out. So, you can kind of go one of both ways, but I wouldn't feel it necessary to do something directly tied to economics unless you really are passionate about that and you want to do that. In which case, go ahead and spearhead a research project to do something that is directly tied to economics, and that'll be a good learning experience that you can articulate to the admissions office.
Yeah, thank
Thanks,
you so
Akash.
much.
Yeah, this was excellent. Akash, I have a follow-up question to Ananya's question. Like,
Yeah,
if so, you said about you wrote articles in your school newspapers. So, there are a lot of students in India who, they do research or they do, write articles, blogs. Is it enough to get them published in the school article, in the school magazine, or they should be aiming for something higher?
I think you can always aim for something higher. So I had always just reached the level of publishing in the school newspaper and never being able to get it any higher, i.e., publish something more nationally or with far reach. But that is something that some people have done that really differentiates them. So if that is a possibility, if you do think, okay, I can amplify the reach of this article and I can post it online and maybe it goes viral or it goes to other schools, etc., that is absolutely a great way of pursuing it and would help a lot with an admissions process. So I would say, definitely, Dr. Kumar, like, that's a good suggestion. I never did that, but if you do have the opportunity to do that, you should.
Okay, great. Any other Rajni wants to ask a question? Rajni, please go ahead.
Right. I wanted to ask about the essay process and how we were like how you were able to compress like all of your different interests and extracurriculars into that 700-word essay, because I feel like for me I have done things and I have like struggled with academics and then kind of risen up in that sense, and there's a lot that I would want to touch upon during my essay. And how is that something you can do? Because right now the mind mapping process is something we focused on while I'm thinking about it, so we're kind of breaking down everything that I did and then working on the essay. I wanted to ask what you did in order to really show who you are in those few paragraphs.
Yeah, definitely. That's a really good question, Rajani. I think Um, so the part you said about mapping, that's perfect. I think that's really important. I would say though that at least I'm apprehensive about using the 750 words to touch on a variety of interests. I think look, it is so limited, as you said, you only have that many words. It's better in my perspective to really hone in on one interest that means a lot to you and have a very nice story that is interesting enough for the admissions officer to read through and understand who you are, I think that's a better avenue versus, throwing everything at the admissions officer saying, look, I'm interested in XYZ ABC. Like you would rather have one story that's fleshed out and that's more vivid, and done well so the admissions officer can read it and get interested in it versus telling them, there's so much I do. Because during the Common App, I think when you list your interests and your hobbies and they sort of have that, I think it's 10 that you can choose as, okay, these are 10 things that I do, and you only have some 20, 30 words to describe them. At least there you can tell the admissions officers, okay, I do XYZ ABC, but then you can use your Common App as a platform to really touch deeply on one thing. It doesn't even need to be an extracurricular activity. It can be something about your background. It can be something about the way you think. But that's where you can say, here's who I am. And that's much better done when it's a bit more microscopic on one specific thing.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem.
Great. Any other question? Anyone want?
Yeah, Akash, hi.
Yeah.
Is there
Hi.
a difference if one applies for ED1 or ED2? Does it make a difference? Is ED1 preferable? And to your mind, is there a strategy that one follows for, between EDs and EAs?
So I would say, I think ED1 typically is so. If I'm not mistaken, I thought ED1 was where you apply in November. ED2 is when you apply in January or something along those lines. I never did ED1, ED2, but like at least conceptually, being able to express that level of commitment earlier on rather than later is probably better if you do know you have the conviction that this is absolutely where you want to go. Because obviously ED is binding, so once you've gotten in, and there's no going back on that. So if you do feel comfortable, tossing your hat into the ring that early on and being binding in your commitment, then I would say go ED1. And so what was the second part of your question?
Is there a strategy between EAs and EDs that one follows, or what did you follow anything?
Yeah, so I had
between-
Yeah, I think the strategy there is really think about which colleges you want to pursue. So for example, I also really like UPenn. I thought it was a great college. But applying ED there and being binding, I think I always thought, okay, I'll probably have in the back of my mind, it's not my number one choice. And I kind of wish I had at least tried my luck at my number one choice. So you can, be strategic there. If there's a college that you are grappling with, okay, maybe it's number one, maybe it's number two, but it's ED, maybe to optimize your chances, you still apply their ED. And if you'll be happy getting in and you won't think twice about it, then do ED. But I think it really boils down to your preferences. Obviously, ED is a bit better versus EA in the sense that applying ED actually provides you a bit of a boost in your candidacy. EA candidly does maybe a little bit, but not that much. So if you do know, here's a college that's definitely one of my tops and it's ED, and I want to sort of, optimize my candidacy the best way possible, then apply ED there. But if you think, okay, my number one choice is another college that's EA, then just do that, because you should, at the end of the day, never feel like, if you get an ED somewhere, you'll always have back of mind that skepticism.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, thank
Rajvi
you.
had raised. Rajvi, do you want to ask a question?
Yes. Hi, good evening. So, would you recommend applying to summer schools? Like, would it give us an edge off of the others, or it's just like optional?
I think it's more the latter. I think it's more optional. I would say it is a good way maybe of, meeting other people and, figuring out if there's an academic or extracurricular interest that you're interested in. But that said, I would not say it helps directly your candidacy, especially those sort of summer schools that most universities offer. If it's something very selective, very niche, and you think it can, originate a good story out of it, then sure. But I think like a Harvard summer school or like a Yale summer school or insert college here summer school, maybe at the end of the day, that's not differentiating you, and you shouldn't feel like that is imperative to any applications process.
All right, thank you.
Great. Yeah. Ananya wants to ask a question again. Ananya.
Yep,
Right.
As I had one more question.
of
Like
course.
everyone, a lot of people say that you shouldn't talk about your grades in the Common App essay. Like if you've had an academic journey of how you've improved in that, do you think that's like, is it true that it's bad to talk about grades in the Common App, or is it possible to do it?
So I would say there's some validity to that. Obviously, I'm just speaking from my perspective, but if I see an essay and it's talking about getting really good grades in the classroom, there's probably at least 10,000 other students that can say the same thing. So you're not really differentiating yourself saying you got good grades in the classroom. You are differentiating yourself if you choose one specific subject and say, okay, but I also did this outside the classroom. Maybe I did this research project. I spent time digging into it. And then you can really articulate that you had a more driven and specialized focus versus others in that specific subject matter. And then that's obviously the way you got good grades, is just you got really good at it. But showcasing more the way that you got the subject matter expertise, whether that be that research project, whether you worked with that teacher outside the classroom, after hours, like that's the best way to go about it. One thing to keep in mind for everyone on the call is, and this is sort of how I had always mentally kind of justified topics and ways of writing too, is at the end of the day, these admissions officers like Harvard, I mean, I don't even know the number. I think it's some 40, 50,000, something like that, applications that they get every year. So admissions officers have to read that many essays. So they probably won't spend that long reading each essay. If it's something that seems kind of cookie cutter, oh, I got good grades, maybe that wouldn't be of interest to them in the same vein as a story that you can say that only you can say, where they actually would enjoy reading that. At the end of the day, they are, I mean, however crass it sounds, they're not going to spend that long on each essay because there's just so many of them. So when they skim it, also make sure that it passes that interesting test where it's interesting enough and it's differentiated enough where at least they can read it and they actually do want to keep reading it, as opposed to something that's a bit more, commonplace and cliche that they may be a bit more quickly reading.
Okay, so thank you so much.
Yeah.
Great. This was a very good insight. Anyone else? Otherwise, we will close this discussion. Okay, I don't think anyone has a question to ask. So I think Prajvi, do you want to ask a quick question?
Yeah.
Okay.
So like you said to have a more holistic approach in your college profiles. So if I'm good at like several things, but I want to pursue just like one specific thing, so would it be would you recommend like connecting everything to that specific course that I want to do, or I can have diverse activities in my profile? Like, what
No,
should
no,
I
you
say?
can definitely have diverse activities in your profile. I would say that's better because you do want to show like that, okay, you obviously are really good at this one thing, but you have more to you. You are multidimensional and you can sort of say all that. But that said, I also do think if there's one thing that interests you most, that you're most passionate about, that differentiates you, you should still flesh that out too. So it's kind of a, maybe a cop out answer, but both are important, where you should present yourself as someone who is multifaceted, who has various interests, but then you can always say, but one interest in particular matters most to me. And so the way to do that is in your common application, for example, you can list all your several interests. Like I think they give you 10 if memory serves me right, where you can list like, oh, I do XYZ ABC. And then in your common app essay, you can specifically choose that one that you think you're best at, that most interests you, and you can have the essay be about that. So then admissions officers know, okay, so and so does this much, but they have one thing that they're really good at.
All
Great.
right. Thank
Thank
you
you.
so much.
So thank you so much, Akash. It was really, very insightful conversation, and I do really enjoyed it. And I'm sure the participants also gained a lot of insights, and it will be really helpful for them while they are writing their applications, writing their essays. And as I said, we have recorded this, and we are going to use this widely so that a lot of students can be benefited from not only India, but from other parts of the world. So thank you so much, Akash, once again.
No problem at all. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining in what's like late evening now. And thank you, Dr. Kumar, for the opportunity. Really good to see you.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone, for joining. Thank you.